Righto, let's go. So, what we want to look at today, let me just share my screen again, and then we'll just do a quick recap from where we were yesterday, what we did yesterday, and leading into today. You should be able to see my screen right now. Am I correct? Just give me a thumbs up. Can you guys see? Okay, cool. All right, so let's just recap very quickly what we've done so far. I think going back to the beginning, we spoke about what project management is, how it's defined, and we also spoke about be careful of how you define it and how you allow yourself as a project manager to be defined, because that can sort of create a perception of the role that you should play, and be very careful about that. We are not just organizers, we said. We are not just people that work on a framework, but we're a very key strategic individual within the organization, right? And it's very important that we continue having that mindset. So we had a very good discussion about that. We said we are not just meeting coordinators and issue managers and strategic pawns, but we are very key people in the organization, right? We then spoke about the project management conundrum, really, and we went through this diagram about the whole thing about how a customer explains versus what is delivered at the end of the day. So we went through that. We then touched on, just on a very high level, a generic project management process and what that generally looks like on a traditional project, not an agile project, right? And then we had a look at the project management lifecycle of a traditional project. And we sort of touched on when things start and when they sort of roll off or start finishing. And then we had some homework to do, which still most of you haven't done it. None of you, sorry, some of you have done it. And then I think the important thing we left off with on Saturday was the triple constraint theory, all right? I did forget to mention one very important thing when we spoke about triple constraint. That's fine. We'll sort out, Candice. We'll sort out the community afterwards. I think quite a few people are having challenges. We'll have a look after the lesson today, right? Right. So we spoke about the triple constraint theory, and we said that we generally manage three things, that's scope, budget, and time. And ultimately put all these things together. We want to get a quality product or service to the customer. On a traditional project, this is very important. Your scope always remains constant, right? And that's the difference between a traditional project, a waterfall project versus an agile project. In traditional waterfall project, your scope always remains constant, and we are able to play around with budget and time, and sometimes even quality, depending on the project, right? So our budget and time is flexible, but our scope is fixed. So if you think about an example of something like this would be the construction of a building, right? The building is the building, right? The scope is fixed. This is the building we are creating. It has 50 floors, it has so many levels, so many bathrooms, so many whatever. That scope is fixed. Depending on what we find as we start building might determine how the budget needs to change or how the time needs to change. A lot of times when you start building the foundation, you start digging down, there are a lot of complications underground, and that sometimes can change the budget and the time. If you guys think a very good example of this is the Gautrain project, right? So let's just leave corruption aside, because that's a massive issue that messes up with the budget of a project, right? But if you think about what the scope of the project was, so in 2010, well, in fact, if you remember correctly, I don't know if you guys did maybe looked at the case study, the initial plan was to have the Gautrain done by 2009, right? When they started exploding, they found that there were more rocks than they anticipated, and there were a whole of other complications. I don't remember the exact details now, but I think there was a lot of dolomite as well that they found, and at some places the ground wasn't stable enough, so and that was not anticipated. But the scope remained, right? We needed a track from Pretoria to the airport, and then from Park Station to the airport. Right? That was the scope of the project, and that was not going to change. What happened then was, with all the findings and all the complications they had, the budget increased. I think it was about 9 times more than what initially was estimated, and the time increased by almost a full year. Right. So that's a very good example of a very traditional project that you cannot do any other way. It really has to be all or nothing, because you can't build half a track and then let a train run on it while you build the other half. Right. So they wanted the full project done, but we were able to sort of play around with the budget and the time. Okay. Time is a little bit trickier in that sense, because the idea was by 2010 World Cup, it had to be done. But if you consider that the initial plan was actually to have it done in 2009, they actually wanted a year or so, and I can't remember the exact details, but they wanted about a year or so just to run it and make sure that there were no issues by the time World Cup happened. But if you remember correctly, I think they opened it like a month or two before the World Cup. So things didn't go according to plan. It was completed successfully, but successfully with the understanding that it's a traditional project, which means they got all the scope that they wanted, but they had to be flexible with the budget and the time. On an agile project, the scope is very flexible, but the budget and time is fixed. Okay, I'll explain to you how that works when we get there, when we get to the Scrum stuff, but that's the difference between the two, and that's how you know, generally speaking. There are exceptions to the rule, but that's how you know when something can be an agile project and when it has to be a traditional project, is when scope is fixed. Generally, probably 90% of the time, you're going to run a waterfall project. When the budget and time is fixed, a lot of times, or 90% of the time, will probably be an agile project. Right, we'll get into that detail when we get to the agile stuff. And then last night, we looked at creating a project management plan, right? And we kind of said there's a few inputs. We specifically cut out all the fluff and all the stuff that we don't need that's out there in space. And we wanted to make this process of initiation or initiating the project as simple as possible to get us started, so we can run our project, but also give us enough meat so that we have a guiding artifact that's going to help us through the management of the project management lifecycle. Right. So this is the first artifact that we wanted to complete. And we said the inputs to that is the business case. We spoke around how we should always add a financial value to the business case. That always helps with justification of the project and to really see if it's worth doing or not. We spoke about feasibility. We spoke about the project charter. We spoke about the RACI, which is very important. We're going to do a little bit more about this today. And then we spoke about scope, which for me, these two are probably the most important things that you can do at the beginning of a project, right? But all of those things combined, we now have a project management plan. Okay, so that was the first step after we've been appointed as the project managers on this project. Okay, so what happens next? So now, before we go into planning phase, right? And I actually wanted to do this next, but I sort of had a change of heart yesterday because I wanted to show you that how sometimes these things can run parallel, even on a waterfall project. But be that as it may, what we want to do next, now that we understand the project, we know what we're trying to do, we know what the business case is, we know that it's a valid project, that it links back to organizational strategy. It's not going to get stopped when it gets difficult. We have financial backing. We have time to go and do it. We want to set up the project governance. Okay, traditional projects and traditional project management offices are very much based around governance. Any one of you work in an organization where you have a formal PMO, you'll always hear governance, project governance. It's all about project governance. The reason for that is they want to always create a standard process for projects to run to make it easier for a project manager or everyone in the organization to understand what step follows what. And the project management office sort of guides that process. Now, I mentioned to you, I think it was on Saturday, that in instances in organizations where a mistake on a project can cost lives, absolutely, your PMO must be governance based. I don't advocate you do anything outside of the governance that is set, because that governance builds up over time, and the idea really is minimize incidents, right? You want to go as long as possible without any incidents, and your governance, your project management governance helps with that. Every other industry, governance sometimes can take away from your project. They can unnecessarily delay your project. They can add cost to your project. And one very important thing is they can, depending on how rigid the framework is or the governance is, it can stifle a lot of creativity within your organization. So if you're in an organization where competition is tight, time to market is very important, governance should not be the emphasis of your project management office or any project for that matter, right? It should be flexibility and time to market. So please just keep that in mind. But it does serve an important role, right? So it helps you manage risks and issues, and we'll talk about that when we get to the stakeholders. They help you make decisions, not just project decisions, but also way of work decisions. So if you are stuck and you're not quite sure what to do in a certain instance, the process and the governance sort of guides you. All right. They help you to manage stakeholders at different levels. And it assists with delivery. So that project management framework that is run by generally the project management office is your sort of guide as to how you deliver. So for instance, deployment guidelines and project plan guidelines and those type of things, right? My challenge always with governance is you want to hit a sweet spot of balance. Very strict governance organizations. And I remember back in my early days when I started managing project management offices, it was very exciting to build governance frameworks, and I was very excited to learn the skill, and I built very cool governance frameworks in the financial services sector. And then we realized, but this is actually a waste of time. It doesn't make sense on the projects because it just delays projects and it adds too much red tape to a project because you have so many touch points and sign-off procedures and steps to follow. And the other thing that I mentioned is we realized very early that it stifles creativity. It's not it is important. It is very important to have, but it is important to have a very good balance of governance and time to market. And again, let me reiterate, if lives are dependent on a good product, then governance is important. All right. So what is this governance? Let's talk. So the role players on your project, generally, this is what the structure looks like. Okay, so you have a project sponsor, and by definition, this is the person who provides you with the money that you need to execute in the project. Okay, so any decisions, financial and or scope related, they are the first people that you're going to speak to. Generally not the only. We'll generally have a committee, or they will appoint someone on their behalf, because sometimes they're very busy people. It might be the CEO of the organization. So they'll appoint a committee, but you as a project manager always make sure that when you do your RACI, you have very clearly stipulated that when we reach, so within the project and the project team, we are able to make financial decisions up to a certain level, that we put that guardrail in place, and everything that exceeds whatever the amount is, that needs to be escalated to the project sponsor. All right. The idea around that is you don't want to, bombard them with every decision. You want to be empowered, and you want to be empowered and empower your team to make certain decisions, but you don't want to carry too much financial responsibility. I think within guardrails, you then escalate and elevate those decisions for them to make. In the absence, like I said, always have a proxy, and clearly state that in your RACI, that when they're not available, there's someone else that you can turn to make those decisions, so that your project's not delayed in their absence. Right, and then this is us over here. We oversee execution, and we largely, I think generally the most important thing is we manage on a day-to-day basis the triple constraints, this trade-off between budget, time, scope. It's a daily thing that we sort of have to maneuver and we have to manage because these things flux all the time. So that is a large part of what we do. Then we have people like Nkululeko. So generally within the traditional project space, we generally don't have product ownership, right? They generally tend to operate more on agile projects. Because the product world is about time to market. It's about getting stuff to the customer as fast as possible. So they generally don't operate within a traditional project. So you generally have people like business analysts or systems analysts or those type of people who help us gather the requirements that we document on the BRS that we spoke about on Saturday. But I thought it's important to introduce this capability here because we're going to be dealing a lot with product owners when we get to the agile side, right? But basically what product owners do on a very high level is they determine a priority. So what needs to happen now and what needs to happen next. And they ensure that whatever we're doing aligns to organizational strategy. They help us with that, right? It's very important. They sometimes get involved in stuff that they shouldn't, and then this lacks a lot of the time. But this is their main responsibility. They are not Scrum Masters. They shouldn't be doing admin on projects. That's not their responsibility. They really should be guiding us in terms of priority. All right, okay, that was for you, my friend. And then we have our development team, and our development team.
Yeah, thanks.
It's a pleasure. And then our development team are a mixture of different capabilities, right? And that is the development team really is anyone who's responsible for helping us deliver, for actually doing the work. Anyone who's responsible in the team for helping us do the work, whether it be engineers, QA people, testers, whatever, designers, architects, whoever they are that's involved in the delivery of the actual product, they're our development team. Now, very important thing to note, especially in software development, we generally have a software developer or an engineer. We have a test analyst or a QA person. We have a business analyst. Those are generally the types of people that we have on a project to deliver the project. What we often don't consider is that we have capabilities that are required outside of them. So we oftentimes need an architect. We oftentimes need someone who's on the infrastructure side, right? We need product owners, or we need business people who do not necessarily sit on a generic project team. It is important to view those capabilities that you need, identify the people, and view them as part of your project. Do not view them as stakeholders. It's very important that you do this because once you do, they divorce themselves from the delivery of the project and you struggle to get hold of people and you struggle to get time with these capabilities that you need. What I advise you to do is when you do your racing and when you set up your governance, make sure that those people are available when you need them, right? When we start getting into the planning phase, I'll show you how to identify when we're going to need them, but make sure for those time periods because we don't necessarily need them all the time, but when the team needs them, that they are available for us. And the planning is very important. And that's where the real skill of project management comes in, is to really to identify when we're going to need these skills and to be able to negotiate the availability of those people during those times so that we don't get delayed when we need them, right? And they don't become blockers for us. Okay, and then quality assurance people, I know that they are part of the development team. I see your question, guys. We'll deal with them once we're done, yeah? But you can keep posting them. The QA people are generally part of the development team, but I did want to isolate them here because it is quite important skill set to have, especially when you look at projects on software projects. We know that they're supposed to be there, but when you look at construction projects, for example, or architecture stuff, they generally sit outside the team because they act as an inspector sometimes, right? They sort of allow you to continue building and then they come and find fault. It's a very different mindset on a software project because the intention of QA is not to break what we build, but to help us build, right, to the best level of quality. It's a little bit different on a construction project or within the petrochemical industry, because what they're really trying to do is they do their best to find defects, right? And they sort of act outside of the team for that purpose. Right. So very two important structures. The most important being your steering committee or your project board. They're sometimes referred to as both, but it's the same thing, right? Now, this is the thing that I think trips up most project managers and gives most of us anxiety, is the steering committee. Okay, so I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about the steering committee today. But their purpose really is to oversee project progress. They provide strategic guidance. I think that's the most important thing. And they help us make key decisions that exceed the scope of decisions that can be made within the team. Right. So when we have issues, when we have risks that the team cannot deal with, the steering committee is their responsibility is to help us. They're also responsible for giving us a strategic direction. So if anything needs to change, if anything changed within the market and the project needs to change direction, they are the community that give us that guidance, right? They are not the police of the project, because that's generally how we see them. They are not there to give project updates. That's not what we do with them. We seek them really for guidance. That's a very important thing. Progress is important for them, but it's not the main thing for them, and they don't care about the detail really, right? So when we talk about this actual steerco sessions, they're not interested in the detail. This community is generally it'll make your sponsor, some high-level SMEs, possibly the CEO of the organization, depending on the importance of the project. But so they don't really care about if your project plan is delayed by a day or two. They really want to know, are we largely on track? Are we red, amber, green? That's generally how we address them. Those are the type of metrics that they like. If everything's green, they're fine. If it's amber, they're still okay. But when things start going red, that's when they start losing it. Okay. And then the project management office, as we mentioned before, their role really is to provide the framework and oversight, or the framework oversight, and they provide support to the project manager, right? So whenever a project manager is stuck on the actual capability of the project management skill, it's a very good community to go to. Like, I don't understand, I've got this issue, I'm dealing with the stakeholder, some guidance. The project management office is there to provide that. Okay, not every organization has a PMO, and I get that. A lot of times you need to find sort of mentors, you need to find a more senior project manager to get guidance from. But it's important that you have that. It's important that you have that coaching, and their function is to perform that coaching. They don't do coaching very well, by the way, because they're so governance focused. They are prescriptive generally, so it doesn't lend itself to a nice coaching environment, which I am in favor of more than governance. But yeah, that's the nature of a PMO. Right. Then important, the general project management meetings that you will be involved in, all right? The first one is the steerco. Steerco. And this gives us a lot of anxiety as project managers. So generally they happen once a month. I don't know if you guys do it differently, if you have a different cadence, but generally once a month, the stakeholders want to get together and they want to get an understanding of where we are at, right? So the purpose of this session is to provide a high-level update. And the update really is, in fact, I have a template. Let me share this on my screen quickly to show you guys an actual steerco that I did. But this was a transformation project. So I was doing an agile transformation for my client in Dubai. But I just want to show you one element very quickly. Right. So what these stakeholders really want to see is they want to get a view of the risks, and they want to know if they are needed. All right, that's important. If they are needed to remove some of those risks for us, or to take advantage of some opportunities. That's one of the most important reasons for a steerco. The other is to provide an update, and I like to use a flight plan as an example. This is the type of view that they generally like to see. They want to see month by month, as an example, where we are, what's happening. I know this is a bit complicated and it's very detailed, but they like this type of view, generally speaking, right? They want to see that things are flowing. And what I generally do is, if there's an activity that is in danger, I would generally make this block amber or green or red, and that would indicate whether on which activity I need support on, or I need help on, or where we are fine. Okay. What a steerco is not meant to do, guys. Oh, did I stop sharing now? Forgive me. Let me just get my share back. Right. A steerco is not a detailed project update. Please, that's very important to note. All right. When you have stakeholders that want detail in a steerco, right? And I've had this before, and it causes a lot of disruption. In fact, the case study that I gave you guys is an actual program that I delivered, and the sponsor of this program was that he was that type of person. He was an actuary. I beg your pardon. He was an actuary and black and white personality, right? There's no gray area, and he wanted a lot of detail in a steerco. So initially, we went and we had a 12-page, well, for 14 deck, PowerPoint slide deck that we went, and he wanted to understand the project plan to the lowest level of detail. And so what that does is every other stakeholder sits there and they're like, but we're not interested in this. So we're spending 2 hours, 3 hours in a steerco, that we're spending doing project management meetings and updates in the steerco. So what we decided to do was to have a separate session with him where we share the detail so that we could have a more constructive steerco session, right? So you have to think about that very carefully. Where your stakeholders are high level and that's what they want to see, that's perfectly fine. If you're a consultant, Kedron, for you who want to go into that space, generally consultants on the work that we deliver, we're generally not expected to have steercos with our stakeholders or our sponsors. I recommend that you do, and literally give a two slides, 2-slide update. What are my risks? What are my issues? Or what is my progress based on what was asked, and just if there's any changes that they want. It's literally that simple. All right. The reason why this gives us a lot of anxiety and a lot of heartache is because we tend to think that we need to give a lot of detail in a steerco, and we don't. It's not the purpose of a steerco. That level of detail comes up in the PMO meetings. So when we have project update meetings with team and we invite a whole lot of other people, that's where we give detail. We need it, right? This you can generally do once a week, and it doesn't have to be a long meeting, 45 minutes to an hour. Sometimes, stakeholders are fine with getting an email update. I generally don't like email updates, but if that's the nature of the organization, that's perfectly fine as long as the update goes out to them. But that's where the detail sits. All right, that's where your lower level detail, where we talk about capacity and we talk about missed deadlines on task level, on deliverable level, but does not impact the project greatly in terms of delivery dates. Okay. Then we have an architecture review board. A lot of you might not have this if you're not in the IT space or in the construction space, but generally this is where the architectural community approves the project plans and designs. And if anything needs to change, we generally have every 2-week session with the architects, and we just validate, where we are, if we're still on the right track, if we need advice, if we need to change anything, how do we go about that? Then there's other meeting technical review board. I think a very important one is the change advisory board. Most organizations have this, especially in the tech space. The OCAB is a very important session where we go and get approval for anything that is going live to the customer. So whether we developed a new product, whether we developed a new app, whatever we take into the customer, this is the community that gives us the go ahead. So they would generally ask us questions around the functionality and how it impacts the customer, and they will take the final decision on whether it's okay to take it live to customer or not. Right. Risk management committee. This is obviously a very important one because risk is a lot of what we do. Quality assurance committee. There's not many of these around in many organizations. Communication committee also not. Status reporting, that again, you can, as part of this session or this update, that is a status update. Issue and defect management committee. We generally don't have committees, generally speaking, for these, but we need to manage them. We need to have people that we call on when we have defects and we have issues, and sometimes it's even the steering committee that help us with that. And then continuous improvement committees, these are very important. Traditionally on a waterfall project, we generally have a post-mortem at the end of the project, and we use that data or that feedback that we receive, that we go through, that process that we go through to help us improve going into the next project. In an agile project, we have retrospectives, but it's generally just how do we get together, let's understand what went well, what didn't go well, so that we can improve going forward to the next piece of work. All right. And I think that's it for the governance. I want to spend a bit more time, and I want to maybe open up. I saw there were some questions we can get to, but I think this one I really wanted to emphasize the project steering committee. That's probably the most important one and the one we generally don't do well at. By the way, frequency, I would actually advocate that you do it more than once a month if you only do it once a month. I would close that feedback loop because a lot can happen within a month and there's a lot of surprises that happen. The other challenge that I forgot to mention is that if you're in an environment that is politically charged, this can be a very, very, very difficult conversation to have, especially if you have a risk that you need your steerco, and this is an actual example. You have a risk that you need to log in your steerco, and so you generally send out your steerco pack before the session. Let's say you do it a day before, a few hours before, and your risk sits in the department of one exec, and he does not. He possibly feels that mentioning this risk exposes him or it makes him look incompetent or less competent. That causes issues, right? So now you have people calling you an hour before saying, take this off the steerco pack, I'll sort it out or whatever, but the problem is that the risk is still there. So how do you sort of manage those political interactions that can happen in your steering committee? It can be, and it is in most organizations, a very, very politically charged environment, right? One tip I can give you guys is make sure that there are no surprises, whatever you do. Okay, so the more you increase the frequency, that helps, but always make sure that whatever pack you prepared for the executive committee, that it goes out with enough time so that everyone understands what's in there. Or better yet, have conversations with them before. So actually go to the exec and say, look, we've got this issue. We're going to raise it in the steerco. I'm giving you a heads up that it is there. How do you want to deal with it? Right? That gives them time, give them a day or two to sort of think about it. And they might resolve it before the steerco, and you can remove it. There's no need to have it there. Or they can sort of have discussions, for you and resolve it for you. But the point is, and the principle is, make sure that there are no surprises. Always socialize people before the steerco, especially if you're dealing with a highly charged organization or a project for that matter. Right. Does that make sense, guys? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Hell yeah. Right. I'm going to go to the questions. What if project governance sits outside of the core delivery team? Okay. Do you want to expand?
Yeah, so I think this is where we have business project managers, and we have our own ways of working and our team structure as, yeah, so we have our own way of working and our delivery managers and everything. So the product project governance is not something that we are maybe aware of too much. Um, they just come in and ask for timelines and so on. And yeah, I was just trying to frame the question around, yeah, what if the governance framework sits outside of what we are doing
Yeah.
to deliver?
So yeah, so and I understand your question is specifically for the context you are in right now in your organization, right? So
Yes,
you are running agile projects as a product owner. So we don't really focus on timelines and milestones really, but you have a very strong governance driven PMO that constantly is nagging you to give them timelines, right? And that's not how we sort of plan our work
correct.
as agile teams. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I think the key sometimes is to find a balance. So here's why that question around timelines are important, right? Because and generally the PMO does not understand agile way of working as well as we do. Okay, so them asking for a timeline is driven by the business need to have it. It's not necessarily a governance thing. It's the business need to understand when things are delivered so that we can prepare marketing, we can we can prepare finance and everyone else and the customer and all those type of things, all that work that goes around delivery of something. What is challenging is that rift between, okay, but we do the same thing as product people on an agile project, we just do it differently. Now,
Yeah.
for me, the answer or one answer is not the only thing, but one answer is to find that balance. And let me tell you what I'm doing now in that situation. So, when we go through quarterly planning, that is a very good way of sort of meeting them halfway, right? So as opposed to planning sprint by sprint, let's actually create a bit of a runway of milestones that we want to achieve either month by month or quarter by quarter. And now we sort of tweak the information that we develop or the plans that we develop, these roadmaps that we develop over a quarterly period and how we want to increment or iterate our product and share that information as a milestone for them. So they understand it that way. We look at the product roadmap, then really look at it that way. So how do I then change the information and present it in a different way that's palatable for them, but we're still giving them the same thing? Does that help? I saw a thumbs up.
Yeah, yeah. Thumbs up. Thank you.
Cool. Shalane, are they the same? I presume we're talking about product owners, right? Are they the same as project owners? Was
Yes.
that your? Okay, so not necessarily. So a product owner, the role of a product owner is they own an end-to-end product that gives the customer value, right? So we're not just creating a screen on a page because a project owner can own they own a project that touches a piece of functionality somewhere, or even if they deliver a project end to end, they don't own the other project after it's in production. A product owner owns it, whether we're doing a project on it, whether we're iterating or incrementing, and they own it when it's in production. So, for instance, if your company does a WhatsApp, they give the customer WhatsApp functionality to interact with the customer, right? So you're able to do stuff on WhatsApp. You can send, you can pay via WhatsApp. You can remove errors. You can do whatever you want on a WhatsApp. Or let's use a better example. In the insurance industry, we do everything on apps now, right? So you can log a claim on an app, you can pay your premium, you can change your cover, you can increase and decrease limits, you can do all of that stuff. A project owner will run a project that will possibly help build new functionality on the product. The product owner owns the product end to end, whether we're building new functionality or we're not. They are responsible for the product. And that means, and a lot of them miss it here, they're responsible for the profitability of the product. The project owner is not. They must run a good project. The product owner takes responsibility for my return on investment. What am I spending to get stuff done? What revenue am I generating from this? Or what cost am I saving? That's the core function of a product owner. Okay. I hope that helps. Can the project go on with governance permission? Yes, it can. You can run a project as a product owner, solo, shoot from the hip, absolutely fine. Whether it will be a good project or not, sometimes those are actually the best projects to run. So let me give you an example. I have a very good friend who, so he's head of payments for FNB, right? He's the CIO for payments. So he's got a very senior role within the bank. And we had a conversation one day, and I was asking him, how do you run your projects? What sort of framework do you use? Do you use SAFe? Do you use PI planning as a tool? And he said, no, I don't care about any of that stuff. I don't care about governance. I get people together and we do the work, right? And he doesn't care about documents. He doesn't care about artifacts. None of that stuff mattered to him, okay? And you might think of him as a bit of a maverick or as a shoot from the hip or as cowboy, but what he says is that my applications work, my customers are able to do payments, and I give them new functionality all the time, and I don't care about the other stuff. And that's what's valued to him. So if you bank with FNB and you go on the app, there's always a new way to pay, whether it be e-wallet or GeoPay or all these other cool things that they do. That's him, right? And none of those things are documented during the project. He doesn't have steer codes for them. He doesn't have, okay, well, he maybe does have steer codes, but he's so close to his team that he doesn't need it, right? He doesn't need updates because he knows exactly what's happening, because he sits with the dev team and they're together all the time. So the answer is yes. And the answer sometimes is that those projects often are run better than these lengthy projects with too much governance that just derail the other project. Does that help, Mpho?
Thank you. That makes sense. Awesome stuff. Thanks.
Cool. Kidron, let's go to yours. Can the organization's internal audit team also fall within? Yes. They can. And they can sometimes be the most hated people, right? And they are often the reason why we have a lot of governance, because we need to satisfy internal audit. And we want to satisfy internal audit because we want to satisfy external audit. So they prepare us for the external audit, and if we need to report to the Reserve Bank and other governing bodies. So yes, they form that role. And a good tip is don't see them as outsiders. Bring them closer to the project so that you avoid the things that they're going to make you redo. So when you go through your governance setup, make sure that you do the things that they need and don't do more than that. Don't go and overkill on governance. If it's a project that needs approval from the Reserve Bank or FICA stuff or whatever the case may be, involve them in the project so that you only do the bare minimum of what is actually needed and you don't spend time doing unnecessary stuff. Does that answer your question, Kidron?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Pleasure. NK, when I look at the actors who provide direction at the roadmap strategy level, okay, do you want to unmute and give us context of what you're asking, sir?
Yeah, so, sorry, when you just toggle to I think it's to the right, there's actors there, right? So, who, and maybe I typed it incorrectly, who provides direction at a roadmap or strategy level? Is it because I was just saying here, before we've got a backlog, the product owner's got to get some sort of guidance to say, as a business, we are chasing 50% engagement on this app, and these are the projects that's going to give us that. So I was just asking, looking at the role players and actors here, like who would give that, and is that in another forum, possibly before we start to define a backlog, or yeah?
Yeah, so the risk of me introducing product ownership here was always that, right? Because remember, in a traditional project, we don't have a backlog. We deliberately have a business case and we deliver a project against the business case, right?
Yeah.
On an agile project, that's where we start building backlogs and we start doing it that way. But let me answer your question this way, or maybe let me answer it with a question: who ultimately owns the direction of the product? Is it the product owner? And so there's a difference between a product owner and a product manager, right? But let's say for the purposes of this conversation, that's one person. The one who owns, the one who's responsible for the profitability of the product in question. That's the person who needs to make those decisions. Now, if that person is not represented on a strategic level where those conversations are happening, my question is, are they really then responsible for that product? Are they really the product owner? The biggest challenge I face when we go and we do agile transformations and we do executive consulting and coaching, the biggest challenge we have in pretty much every organization is disempowered product owners. Product owners who are there and work on a backlog, but don't make strategic decisions. It's a massive, massive, massive problem. So my question is, back to your question, who is responsible for the profitability of that product? That person should be the one who makes those decisions. And they should be represented on a strategic level.
Yeah, then the product owner, product manager. Yeah.
That's the answer I would give. But in practice, it doesn't always happen, right? You often, as a product owner, even product manager, get told what to do. But again, it goes to your strength. And we had the same conversation about the project manager not taking ownership of that strategic conversation. I think it's really upon the product owner whose job it is, and you have KPIs that's related to the performance of your product. If you are not able to make decisions to steer the direction of that product in a way that drives your delivery and profitability and satisfaction of your customer, you have a problem.
Yeah.
If someone else is making those decisions for you, you have a problem.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, tough one, obviously, depending on the environment, and I think it's all about influence here then.
Exactly, right. And if you think about it, in the software development space, it's a little bit easier. We can get away with stuff. But think about someone like Candice as an example, who's in pharmaceuticals, right? A product for them is an actual physical, tangible thing that goes into the body of a customer, right? Or a patient. Think about a product owner in that instance is someone who makes the decision that this thing is safe for use and we can go and sell it and we're going to make a profit from this for the organization. Okay, if you look at it in that context now, that's so important. That role of whoever owns the end-to-end from conceptualization to delivery to the customer, so benefits realization, make sure there's no negative comeback from this tablet that we're selling to the customer. That one person is responsible for that whole thing. And if they're not allowed to make decisions that affects that outcome, either negatively or positively, then they have a problem. If they're held responsible for it, but they're not able to decide on what goes in and what doesn't, it's a massive, massive problem.
Yeah, I think, thanks. I think it's a good answer, Arian. Probably needs a little bit more unpacking, but I think for this project management conversation here, I'm clear. I just had one more question on the meetings, right? And the committees that were set up there.
Yeah.
So if it's agile, do we need all of these committees? Don't these committees now maybe take away time from the project. And I'm just really asking, in a big organization, I've seen all of these, a big telco, all of these boards and architecture review board before we even move forward with something. It has to be approved by the architecture, technical review, and so on.
Yeah.
And if it's just an agile project, and do we need all of this?
The simple answer is no. That's the point of an agile project, right? So that's the problem that agile tries to solve, is that a traditional project management likes governance, right? We generally now where we are, and again, I'm going to say if your project is not life dependent, then no, dude, you don't. These are there
Okay.
to show you what happens, and they are there, and they waste time. And that's why I said that the sweet spot in governance is what you want. You don't want heavy governance. You want a nice sweet spot that says, okay, these things are, and they can change project to project, right? On one project, you might not need the architecture board or even CAB, and in others you may. If you're in the product space, a lot of times you don't need CAB. You know, you test something in the market and you take it live. You know, so it depends on the project, but also my advice always is you want a sweet spot. What makes sense for the project is what you do. If it doesn't make sense, if it's just there for the sake of governance, to get rid of it as fast as you can. Get rid of it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Answered, and thank you very much.
Cool, Candace, I saw your hand up.
Arian, no, thanks. You know, this is all very interesting because I'm kind of reflecting on the different industries and how strategic kind of direction is imparted within the various companies. You mentioned the pharmaceutical industry, but we had one specific project where I absolutely understand why Agile is used in the technology space. And why traditional would lend itself more towards maybe the pharmaceutical industry because it's a more slow going project, but and maybe governance would have a different slant as well in that industry, but and who the project owner is, because a product manager is definitely responsible for generating the revenue, but also they don't often dictate strategic direction. That comes from higher up. So I'm kind of, based on what everybody's saying and the inputs, I'm really enjoying this because it's giving me a better understanding of the different industries and how things flow and just where these types of tools, I don't know what to call it actually because I'm learning obviously, but where they all fit together. Thank you.
No, that's good because the idea with this is that you start sort of contextualizing it to your environment and see what's happening and what's maybe not good and what's good, right? And I think in the pharmaceutical industry, governance is good because lives depend on it, right? If you make a mistake and something goes out, and we see it all the time with medication getting recalled. You know, Johnson & Johnson have a lot of this. Every now and then we see this, and I always think back to governance. Like, where was the QA process? Why was this not tested, or why was it tested incorrectly? Or, you know, so those things rely very heavily on governance, and that's why it does take a bit longer. If you think in the US, they have the FDA process, right? Before anything can get approved, it has to go to FDA, and it has to spend time, and you have to sort of over time see and measure the results and see if it's not harmful and whatever. So time to market is not necessarily important. COVID it was because of the pandemic. So time to market in that instance was important. So a lot of the governance got flouted, right? And that's a very good example of the context of the day. But generally speaking, though, the industry is very slow moving, and that's okay. It needs to be slow moving. In tech and every other industry, it's about speed. Banking, especially, they're finally starting to wake up now to realize that speed is important. They also were very governance driven, but a lot of them now are embracing speed, and it's still difficult for them because organizations are so big. You know, it's very difficult to make a 3-point turn with a big ship. But they are realizing the need for that. But yeah, it's very interesting how different this is given the different context of the industry. Cool. Jaden asked, is it highly charged because of the money? I'm presuming you're talking about a Steerco. Yes, so money, but less money, because remember, the money that gets put forward generally is not your money as an executive, right? There's budgets for projects, and that's where the money comes from. But it has a lot more to do with one, power, I think, and then also what I'm measured against. So if I'm a C-suite executive and my KPI says that I have to do whatever, I tend to want to prioritize my stuff because my bonus depends on it, right? My personal bonus. So the project budget necessarily is not an issue, but it's what am I getting out of this, and that's where the politics comes into play. The example that I gave you guys in the case study, I really tried to emphasize the politics, and we'll look at it on Thursday when we really go through the case. But I make the point that the business where the project sits, they acquired 3 other businesses. Now think about it this way, right? So we, as the business, we have a CFO, we have a CEO, and a CIO, and a CTO, etc. And we acquire businesses that have the same capabilities. So now you have 3 CIOs fighting for one position, because there's only one now. You can't have 2 CIOs in one company or in one organization, right? So now you have 2 CEOs or 3 CEOs fighting for one CEO role, and you have 3 CFOs doing the same. And then you take it a level lower, you have IT managers and operations managers and product managers and all these people fighting for the one position that's available in the organization. Now that charges the environment a lot, because I have my agenda and everyone else has the same, and there's limited capacity to do stuff. So who's going to get their stuff done first so that they can meet their KPIs? It is a monster to deal with. Mergers and acquisitions, guys, that's the most politics you'll ever see within an organization. It's difficult. It is extremely difficult. So we're going to deal with that in our case study. We're going to deal with a bit of that politics, not as extreme as it can be, but then there is an element of that, and we're going to have to figure out how we deal with that. Does that help you, Jen?
Yes, that does, bro. Okay. So because of the conflict, you'll find yourself in this situation because people are coming with their own assumptions and their own ideas. So that's where this whole thing gets jumbled up.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, man. All right. Then Joseami asked, why is the Scrum Master not mentioned under actors? Joseami, are you still here? Let's see a message that is dropping off. Oh, you're still here.
Yes, I'm still here.
All right. Do you want to ask your question?
No, I was just checking the list of actors there on that other site.
Yep.
I was actually just thinking maybe, from this list, I was actually just looking at it and asking myself, because I see a project manager and a product owner. So I know that in most instances, product owners need Scrum Masters to help them manage the delivery, that will be done by the development team. So I was just wondering, is there a reason?
Yeah, so remember, you're looking through the lens of IT, right? But product owners are not only in IT. And again, I'm going to go to Candace's example, right, in pharmaceuticals. So you have a product owner, and they don't necessarily have a Scrum Master, but they've got a project manager who delivers projects on behalf of a product owner. So the context here is not on an agile project, but we do have product owners and product managers that sit outside of an agile space.
Okay. So they'd be also fulfilling a role of a business requester.
Yeah. And they must prioritize, and they must do all the stuff that we know from an agile space a product owner to do. They do similar stuff.
Okay. No, thanks.
Sure. All right. Are there any more questions, guys, before we get into the homework? Okay, cool. Let's get into our homework today. I'll have a look. Sorry, I think we're out of time. I will have a look immediately after on the platform for the community, and I'll resolve it. I promise you tonight. I won't go to sleep until it's resolved. All right, cool. So what I want you guys to do is to create a fictitious scenario or a project. It could be something that you've worked on before, but I want you to create a steerco pack, right? 3 slides maximum, and just how you would. A great, Candace. Good. I'm glad. So everyone should be fine. I don't think there's an issue on the platform. I think it's maybe just an access issue. So I'll resolve that. But create 3 slides maximum on how you would do a steerco pack. Put data of information in, have an attendance, who would participate in the steerco, what are the risks that you face on this fictitious project, or one that you're working on by any chance, or one that you have worked on, or one that's coming up as an example. Put your ideas down on what that steerco should be, and then we'll engage on the community. All right. So I'll comment on your slides as well and kind of say, have you thought about this? Maybe this is too detailed, maybe this is too high level, etc. Put those down, and let's have a discussion on the community on that. Cool, guys. Is that clear? Any questions?
I just have one from my side, Adrian.
Yes, Pinila.
Yeah, like maybe I might have missed this because I was a bit late on other lessons, but I'm not sure where do we actually submit the homeworks because of I did yesterday's one, but I wasn't sure where to actually submit. Sorry if I might have missed it.
So you need to put it on the platform. Just guys, let me just give me 1 second. Let's let me just stop sharing. We're gonna run over by a few minutes, but I think let me address this now with you guys quickly, so that we're all clear. I'm just logging into the platform. I'll show you guys. Okay, I'm sharing. So when you log in, you can go to the communities tab, right? What you're viewing now is from an admin perspective, but you just click on the community tab, and then you click on view community. It might look a little bit different on your side, but I think the principle is the same. You just go to view community, and then you'll see the topics that have been created. It opens. Right, so you'll see NK posted something there. So I posted homework there. So what we'll then do, I'll create a topic normally, right? And then you can comment with your homework on my topic. So like Kidron did here, like Tanay did there. So comment on my topic that I created, and then we can use that topic to collaborate on that homework for that day, so that we're not creating new topics all the time. Okay, so all you do is then you go and reply, and then put your comments in there.
Okay, I see that, but maybe I might have also missed the link because of what I can access at the moment. It takes me to the ariansvanvellingschool.teachable.com. That's where I'm actually at the moment. So it only gives me access to the recordings and the part where you get to start the lesson.
Do you not see on the left-hand side a tab called community?
No, it's not there on my side.
Right. Let me share the link with you guys immediately after this. I'll email it to you.
Okay. Yeah, because of I think that's why we're on 2 different platforms. I might assume.
Cool.
Sorry, Adrian, can I just ask a question? Are we going to be able to upload PPTs onto the topic that you create?
Yeah, you should. If not, just take a snapshot and you paste it on the thing. That's always easier. But you should be able to load your PPTs on.
Thank you.
Carl.
Adrian,
Yebo.
just in respect of Saturday's homework, Because you didn't create a separate topic and I tried to add a post separately. Unfortunately, I couldn't. So Saturday's homework, I replied on, I think, today's one. And I think I added
Okay.
my own for Saturday. But obviously for today's homework, you created a separate topic.
I haven't created today's one yet, so I'm gonna create one for today.
Yesterday's homework, sorry.
Yeah, yesterday I
you
created
a separate topic.
as a new topic, yes.
Yes, so I could respond on that one.
Okay, I think oversight on my side for Saturdays, so I'll create that for you guys, and you can comment on that one.
Okay, cool.
Okay, peeps, this was a good session, good conversation. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys did too. And then we'll see you tomorrow evening.
Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.
I'm gonna stay on 5 more minutes in case
Right.
anyone wants to chat.
Bye.
Right?